I know it's in a sealed bag. I'm handing you a pair of scissors if you'd like to cut either the top or bottom so you can examine that document. Are you familiar with that document?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that related to policy Z05050370?
Yes, it is.
And who is the insured on that policy?
The insured is Dale Harold.
And can you explain to the jury what type of policy that is?
This is a 20-year term life insurance policy that insures his life in the case of either a sickness or an accident or a natural death.
Now, you said a sickness. Would that include cancer or anything of that nature?
Yes, ma'am.
And you said it also includes accidental?
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any other circumstances other than death under which this policy would pay out?
Just a natural death.
Now, with this policy, are you also familiar with the application for the policy?
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to show you it's been admitted as Exhibit 325. And I believe you might have to shuffle through a few papers in there. I believe you might need to go midway through. Now, in this, are those papers also, or some of those papers also related to the West Coast life insurance policy?
Yes, ma'am, they are.
Now, relating to this policy for Mr. Harrell, when was the application for that policy completed?
September 20th, 2008.
You said September 20th, 2008?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, at the time of the completion of application, was payment submitted as well?
Yes, it was.
I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 429. Are you familiar with those documents?
Yes, ma'am, I see it is.
Okay. And those are two checks. Can you explain what those checks were for?
Yes. When the application was initially completed, a check for $98.71 was submitted with the application. It binds the coverage, gives you temporary life insurance coverage. In the course of issuing this policy, there were some documents that needed to be signed that weren't signed timely, so the coverage was designated as not paid. The documents were subsequently signed, sent back into the home office with a second check paying the premiums, I guess, up to date at that point.
And are those checks kept in the normal course of business?
These two would be, yes, ma'am.
So you're saying not every monthly check, but the checks that would start an application or insurance policy would be kept, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Your Honor, the state moves to admit Exhibit 429 into evidence.
Proceed.
Thank you. Now, on those checks, looking at Exhibit 429, what is the name of the first, on the first check, the $98 one?
The only name I can read on it is Devault.
And turning to the second check, what is the name on that check?
Marissa Marissa Suzanne Devault.
Going back to the policy, when was that policy effective?
It was effective on October the 7th, 2008.
And the insured was Dale Harrell. Who was the beneficiary of the policy?
Marissa Suzanne Devault.
Now, as part of an insurance policy application or process, does one have to list the relation between the beneficiary and the insured?
The application does ask for that information.
And in this case, what was the relation between the insured and the beneficiary?
On the application, the relationship is listed as spouse.
Is there a secondary beneficiary?
Amazing. I've been
on
Claritin
this
Clear
policy?
for...
No, ma'am, there is not.
Now, ultimately, was there a claim made on this policy?
A claim was made, yes.
And taking a step back, how much coverage or how much was this policy for?
$750,000.
Now that $750,000, you mentioned that this is payable on death. Is there any lesser amounts that are paid for smaller injuries?
No, ma'am.
So just to make sure I understand, if this insurance policy is to pay out, it's upon death and it's for the total amount. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, you mentioned a claim was made on the policy. Was it ultimately paid out?
It was ultimately paid, yes.
And who was the policy paid to?
The courts here in Arizona.
I'm going to show you two other documents. Exhibit 362, which has already been admitted, and if I could get you to open this one as well. There's a paper in it, so if I can just get you to cut the seal here at the top, is to not cut any of the papers. And what is the document contained in that exhibit?
This is an amendment to the application.
And is that a West Coast Life document?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Turning to exhibit 378. Switch that with you. Thank you. If you can open that one as well. And starting with that exhibit, is that a West Coast Life document as well?
Yes, ma'am, I believe it's part of the application process.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's part of the application.
Now turning back to exhibit 379, is this the type of information that's routinely given to customers when a policy is issued?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, the state would move to admit exhibit 379 into evidence.
Objection. Proceed.
Yes, sir. You mentioned that the payment for this policy was made to the court. Why is that done?
I'm not exactly sure why it was paid to the court. We were just instructed by our counsel at the time to pay the courts.
When there's a dispute or some argument over who a payment of policies to be paid out to, and the court system gets involved, do you generally wait until the resolution of that, or do you pay it to the court?
We normally would pay it to the courts, so we can go ahead and get out of the case as it were, and let them decide who deserves the payment.
So in that situation, is it you or the courts who decide who the payment goes to?
It would be the courts.
Nothing further from the state, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
You had talked about this policy, let's see what number, it was 0505, I'm sorry, 5050370, correct?
Yes, sir.
But there was another policy involving this case. Are you aware of that?
I am not.
Okay. So you're now aware that there were mutual policies that were taken out in this case?
No, sir.
Okay. And the policy number 02586-975, where the insured was Marissa Suzanne Devault, you have no knowledge of that?
I do not.
Okay, so we'll just talk today then about the policy that you're here to kind of present.
Okay.
Is that okay? You had mentioned that the policy is dated September 20th of 2008.
The application was.
I'm sorry, yes, the application. And the payment was made at that time.
Yes, sir.
Okay, but the payment was made, the check that you presented was written out by the beneficiary in this particular case, which would be Marissa Devault.
Yes.
Is it uncommon to have that situation where do you require that the insured write the check, or is it, if it's a spouse, it's okay to have that?
It's not uncommon, no.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned that the policy was for life insurance.
Correct.
And it was for $750,000.
Correct.
Okay. And you mentioned that there were a number of things that happened that were kind of delayed this policy from getting approved right away upon receipt of the check. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you talk to us about some of those things? Do you remember some of the issues?
The one I remember is there was an amendment to the application that needed to be signed.
Okay.
Something that they were trying to clear up, couldn't read or didn't understand.
Okay.
And so they asked for Mr. Harrell to sign that amendment.
Okay.
And as I recall, it wasn't signed very timely.
I see. So was that the only issue that you're aware of?
That I saw yesterday.
Okay. And he did sign that amendment,
He did, yes.
and another check was received.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then at some point, the insurance came into effect.
Correct.
Do you remember that date?
October 7th, 2008, I believe.
Okay. Okay. Let's see, what is the- Now you talked a little bit about paying out to the court and the claims. Can you tell us a little bit about the claim process? What happens in the claim process?
We're notified of the passing of an insured.
Mhm.
We will send out claim forms with a letter requesting information such as a death certificate, completed claim form. That's sent to whoever the beneficiary is.
Okay.
When that information comes back in, we make sure it's all in good order. If it is, then the claim is paid.
Okay. That wasn't done in this particular case, though, correct?
Correct.
There was a contested claim that was filed in this case, right?
That's correct.
And it was not done by Ms. Devault, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, do you remember who that was done by?
I believe it was the estate of Mr. Harrell.
Okay, so would that be common for the estate to file a contested claim?
That is common.
Okay. And to your knowledge, there's nothing in the paperwork here that indicates that Ms. Devault had filed a claim in this case, correct?
To my knowledge, there is.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Either right.
Just a moment, please, Your Honor. In this case, you said a claim was filed by the estate of Mr. Dale Harrell, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
If that claim hadn't been filed by the estate, who would the payment have been made to?
Object.
Ruled.
I don't know.
Generally, does it go to the beneficiary?
If they file a claim, it would.
Just a moment, please, Your Honor. Nothing further from the state, Your Honor.
Jury, have any questions? I don't see any hands. You're free to go, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. State calls John Cabello to the stand. Can you spell your first and last name for me?
First name is John, J-O-N. Last name is Cabello, K-B-E-L-L-O.
Thank you. Please raise your right hand. You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. You can speak right into the microphone.
Sir, could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, I'm John Cabello, Director of Claims for AIG and Regional.
And how long have you been in that position?
I've worked there for just about 15 years now.
And generally speaking, what are your duties?
Generally speaking, as Director of Claims, I was managing staff of about 62, several claims examiners, budget. I approve larger claims that need a second look from our examiners.
Now, as part of your course of business, are the the life insurance policies that your company issues and the payouts that they make, are records of those kept?
Yes, they are.
And are you familiar with those records?
Yes, I am.
I'd like to show you, it's been marked and admitted as Exhibit 325. If you could take a look at that and let me know if you recognize the documents or some of the documents contained therein.
Pardon me. Yes, these look like our records.
I want to specifically talk to you first about the AIG policy number Y as in yellow, M as in mouse, C as in cat, 0091608. Are you familiar with that policy?
Yes,
And who is the insured on that policy?
Dale Carroll.
Now, can you explain to the jury what type of policy this is?
This was, is an accident carried wreck, so it's an accidental death and dismemberment policy.
How does that differ from a life insurance policy?
It is a life insurance policy, but it doesn't cover causes of death that are natural. So if someone were to have a heart attack or a stroke, it won't cover that. But accidental deaths, and as well, it offers a benefit for dismemberment. So it offers a living benefit to someone who's an arm, become paralyzed, or something of that nature.
So in some ways, or it will pay out in different ways than a life insurance policy, correct?
Yes, it doesn't always require the death to be insured.
Now, speaking specifically about this AIG policy for Mr. Harrell, when was that policy effective?
January 1st, 2009.
And who was the beneficiary of that policy?
It was listed as Marissa Devault.
And what was the relation between the insured and the beneficiary?
Spouse.
Was there any secondary beneficiary named in that?
There was none listed.
Now, to obtain this type of policy, not a life insurance, but an accidental death or dismemberment policy, is a medical examination needed?
No, it was not, since there's not a health benefit for it in terms of death by disease. So it's not related, there's not a medical examination.
Now, speaking specifically about this policy, how much is this policy for?
$500,000.
And speaking again specifically about the policy for Mr. Harrell, was a claim ever made on that policy?
Yes, the claim was reported on this in April of 2009. And then again, we sent out forms and then we were notified by the courts later in July.
And ultimately, did this policy pay out?
We did pay this out. We paid it out to the courts. It's called an interpleader. So when we're unsure of who would be the beneficiary to be paid for whatever reason, we will pay it out to the courts if we have claims to do.
Now, this policy for Mr. Harrell, was there also another policy, like a couple policy taken out?
This particular policy number, no, it had no additional liability coverages. There was no spouse or child liability policy.
Was a policy, another policy taken out for Marissa Devault?
Yes.
And is that policy number Y as in yellow, M as in mouse, C as in cat, 0091609?
Yes.
And are you familiar with that policy?
Yes.
And did that policy become effective at the same time as Mr. Harrell's?
Same day, yes, January 1st.
And who was the beneficiary of that policy?
At which point?
Or when it was originally issued?
It was listed as Dale Harrell.
And at some point, did the beneficiary of that policy change?
Yes, it did.
And when did that take place? If you can,
I can probably put through here the exact dates. Lots of pages.
And sir, if it will make it easier on you, I can.
Give us in February and on the page
I can try to get
of 2009.
If you give me just a second, I'll hand you the documents without you having to dig through those. Now, this policy on Marissa Devault, was it the same type of policy?
I found the page.
Oh, you did, great. You don't need to mark
It was
those.
on February 1st, 2009. It was changed to Alan Wayne Flores, executor.
And was this the same type of policy as Mr. Harrell had, this accidental death and dismemberment?
Yes, it was. It was the same.
Just a moment, please, Your Honor. Nothing further from the state, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning, sir. You mentioned you were with American AIG, correct?
AIG, yes.
How long have you been with AIG?
14 years.
14 years. Well, there were two policies involved here, correct?
Two separate policies.
Two separate policies. One with the insured is named Dale Harrell,
Yes.
and one with the insured named Marissa Suzanne Devault, or Devault.
It actually said Harold on the...
Okay, Devault Harrell, okay. Thank you. Let's talk about the first policy that I mentioned first, the one with Dale Harrell, okay? You mentioned this was an accidental injury policy. It was a life insurance policy with an accidental injury benefit.
Right, an accidental death and dismemberment policy.
Okay. And the policy was for $500,000.
That's correct.
Is it common to have different rates for payout for different injuries, for example? Is that common on a life insurance policy?
On this type of policy, it is quite frequently if someone were to suffer total paralysis or the loss of both eyes, it will pay out 100%. If they just lose one arm, one leg, it will pay out 50%. That is common on these types of policies.
So there's probably a graduated kind of rate system in terms of what the policy would pay out at what rate, correct?
Correct.
So the person that's taking out the policy wouldn't necessarily get $500,000 if they were injured, depending on the injury.
Depending on the injury, that's correct.
Okay.
Or not.
Thank you. Now, these were mutual policies. Were they paid together?
They were paid by pre-authorized check or a bank draft.
Okay, so can you explain that, what that means?
Instead of someone mailing a check monthly, it was established with their checking account and the bank reading number to basically draft their premium monthly.
Just so automatically the bank
Automatically,
pays
correct.
for the insurance policy? Okay, thank you. Let me see here. Now, you said the policy actually went into effect January 1st, 2009.
Yes.
And at that point, the insured for the Dale Harrell policy had Marissa Suzanne Devault, or Harrell, as the beneficiary.
So this is beneficiary, yes.
The other policy had Marissa as the insured and Dale as the beneficiary, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. But at some point, this changed.
Her policy.
Her policy. Can you tell us a little bit about that process?
For this beneficiary change, it was done by, we also offer something called e-service, so people can make changes in their account through the internet, through their computer. And they had signed up for this at both accounts actually for e-service, and a beneficiary change is one of those options. So
Okay.
a beneficiary change was submitted electronically.
Okay, so there was no signature on the form, per se?
No,
That you're aware of.
it was like e-signature. You
Okay.
basically check a box like you would on a computer screen.
Okay. And then you mentioned that the claim had paid out for Dale after you had learned, that your company had learned that there was...
Correct. We were informed of the death, and
Mhm.
we were informed that by the courts that there was a trial. And, we had received proof of death and a death certificate and all these things. So we knew the claim was payable and that Mr. Elliott died from an accident, but we paid to the courts because of the controversy.
Now, do you have the paperwork that shows who made the claim, or do you know who made the claim at this point?
Actually, we were instructed by outside counsel to pay it to the courts.
Okay, so you just basically paid to the courts.
Correct.
So there's nothing in there that says that Marissa tried to file a claim?
No, we have no record of that.
Okay. One moment. No further questions. Thank you.
Redirect.
that there's more than one way this policy can pay out. It can pay out for things other than death. In those instances, other than death, who does the payment get made to?
Other than death, it would be made to the owner of the policy.
So the insured rather than the beneficiary.
Yes.
Now, in this case, you mentioned there are two separate policies. Was payment for those together, like as one draft, or were they done as two separate drafts?
I actually don't know the answer to that question, whether they were drafted separately or if they were combined together, but they were both on electronic funds transfer.
Just a moment, please. Nothing further from the state, Your Honor.
Any questions by the jury? I don't see any hands, sir. You're free to leave.
Thank you.
Your Honor, state will be recalling Mr. Flores. Can we approach briefly, Your Honor?
Yes. Flores, you can come back up. You're still under oath.
You all situated, Mr. Flores?
Yes, I am.
Mr. Flores, it's been a while since you were on the stand last. We had started talking about, I guess, dates and times of certain events. One of the things I want to backtrack just a little bit up to December 10th of 2008. You had sat down with the defendant and started, I guess, going through paperwork, wills, power of attorney, those kind of things. Is that correct?
Correct.
Well, the defense counsel's taken a look over that exhibit, Mr. Flores. As part of the documents that were being prepared, she was also making arrangements for the care of her children. Is that correct?
Correct.
And who did she designate as the person who would be caring for her children on December 10th of 2008?
She wanted me to care for her children if something happened to her.
In those documents, there's no provision for Dale Harrell to have taken care of his own children.
In fact, I had mentioned to her that he would likely contest it, and she added a couple of paragraphs explaining to whoever might read the document why she didn't want Dale to have the children, but preferred me to.
And it was at about that same period of time that she told you that the kids weren't even his.
Correct. She told me that just previously.
If you wouldn't mind taking a look at the contents of exhibit number 350, just to verify that those are the documents that were created. And they're all signed and dated December 10th of 2008?
Yes, they are. I had mentioned to her that she had to have two witnesses who were not related, and she took them to her friends to have them signed as well.
Now, also in December of 2008, when you were getting ready to go on your trip, you had made some provisions for her, is that correct? You had left some money for her in a certain location, is that right?
That's correct.
And you drafted a list of things that she could do in your absence, is that right?
Correct. I was concerned if something happened, if she suffered abuse while I was away, that she would have some means of getting out and being someplace safe, not in the home.
All right. Now, the money that you left for her, where did you leave that?
I left some money in a hidden spot in my flower pot behind the house, in my house, in the patio.
How much money was that?
$500.
Behind a flower pot in the back of your house? Did you tell her where the location of that money was?
I left a note in the post office box that we had gotten for her, saying that if she needed the money, that she could call me and I would let her know where it was. I had left money for her in the same spot previously.
So this is a location that would be known to her.
Yeah.
When you came back from your trip, was the money still there?
No, it wasn't.
Did you ask her about the money?
Yes, I did. When she said that she had not taken it.
Did your house get broken into?
The house wasn't broken into, but the back patio in the area looked at it as if it had been ransacked and looked through.
I guess what gave the appearance that it had been ransacked and looked through?
Cushions were off the patio chair. One of the flower pots was turned over. Things were not in their usual place.
Other than the money, was anything else taken that you could see?
Not at that time, but I discovered later that a key, I had a Hyatt key magnetic device attached to one of the poles on the gate to the pool. That was missing.
Is your pool in the backyard as well?
Yes, the patio opens to the pool.
And so in addition to the $500, the key to your house is missing?
Correct.
When you went into your house, did you notice anything in your house that had been disturbed?
No.
Nothing at all?
No.
Did you notice anything that had been taken?
No. The alarm had been on, so it didn't appear that anyone had been in the house, but the key was missing.
Did your alarm go off that you know of?
No.
Now, when is it that you returned back from that trip?
I believe it was December 28th.
So this is before you sat down and did your final promissory note on December 31st?
Correct.
But this was after you had been told about told by the defendant about her plan to kill her husband on his birthday at the casino.
Correct.
Now, you had mentioned before we broke that she had started bringing over a lot of, paperwork over to your house. Is that right?
That was after she was initially arrested and she was out on bail.
So this was after Dale had been attacked,
Correct.
before he died.
Correct.
She started bringing over paperwork.
Correct.
Now, one of the things she brought over to you was a birth certificate and social security card for Dale Harrell. Is that correct?
Correct, as well as the girls and other paperwork,
As well as what?
as well as for the girls.
At that point in time, Dale wasn't going to be doing any traveling, is that right?
Objection, Your Honor, call for speculation. Please lay a foundation for his knowledge, counsel.
Yes, sir. At the time that these documents were being brought over, were you aware of Dale Harrell's condition?
Yes,
Was he able to walk, to your knowledge?
I don't know.
Talk?
My understanding was he was hospitalized.
Looking at exhibit number 348, is this the birth certificate and social security card that she had brought over to your house belonging to Dale Harrell?
I believe so, yes.
Did she give you an explanation as to why she brought these particular documents over to your house?
She brought over all the documents, but we didn't have a discussion about that one in particular.
Going back to the, call it the power of attorney and all that, the documents that we just talked about in exhibit number 350, did you help her draft those documents?
Other than printing them out, I bought a piece of software that had all the forms. So I bought the software, we printed the forms. She picked certain sections that she wanted to include and not include. And it was just printed and she initialed. The only part that required drafting was a couple of paragraphs where she had to explain who she wanted to care for her kids and that, and she wrote all of that.
Oh, in the paragraph that she was including, did you watch her type that, or
I
don't recall?
I don't recall watching her type. I was probably doing something else while she was on her laptop.
Did she mention in there that none of the kids were Dale's?
Not in that document. She had told me previously, and I said that she needed to take some action to prove that, because otherwise, my understanding of the law was that if they were conceived during the marriage, they would be presumed to be his unless she proved otherwise.
Sir, I hand you what's been marked as exhibit number 390. Do you recognize what that is a copy of?
Yes, that was a check, a copy of the check that she had given me to deposit into my account.
For what purpose?
If I recall correctly, you had asked me previously if there were times when we were having trouble getting direct deposit from her work into the joint account, and this was supposed to be a transfer from the account that her payroll was going into the joint account, but it was returned for insufficient.
And the name on the account that that check was drawn off of, whose name is that in?
Marissa Devault.
And so money from that account was never deposited in your new joint account?
No.
Your Honor, I move to admit exhibit number 390.
Objection. Receive.
It's hard to tell on here due to the stamp. Do you remember how much that was for?
$650 even.
Now, this was supposedly the account that her money was going into, is that right?
Yes, she's had a Chase account previously.
Okay. Now, looking at the ledger, and if I understand your testimony from a week ago right, you were basically taking care of the utilities, the house payments, those kind of things for a significant period of time, is that right?
Correct.
The money that you were giving for those expenses based upon the ledger we were looking at, what account was that money going into to take care of those expenses?
Until we had the joint account, and I was pushing her to try to have a spreadsheet, and so we knew when amounts were coming due. Until that point, she was paying them herself.
So originally, the money was going into that Chase account?
Or I was giving her cash.
Okay.
There were sometimes, if something was particularly urgent, if the electricity was about to be turned off, I would go online and make the payment directly out of a credit card of mine.
By December of 2008, you were already receiving information that you had already set up the first account for her at Wells Fargo, is that correct?
Correct.
And that's the account that no electronic transfers were being made into, that you could tell.
Correct.
And to refresh my memory, when did that account get set up, that first one?
I believe the first one was probably October. It was a couple months before December. And so we had a couple of months where the direct deposits didn't go in. And then when we spoke with the bank manager, we changed it to be a joint account.
Now, this check is dated September 18th of 2008, is that correct? You want me to take it?
Yes, September 18th.
So would that first account that you have set up predate the date on that check?
I'm sorry, so this would have gone into the first account that we set up, not a joint account. Correct.
And that check bounced?
Correct.
At any point, did you receive electronic transfer from, I guess, her employer, who was supposedly going into this Chase account, to get deposited in either of the Wells Fargo accounts that you had set up for her?
No.
Now, were you ever given an explanation for why her paychecks never made it to your account?
Initially, she said she'd spoken with the people at Macy's and that there was some hiccup in the electronic transfers, and so a couple of times she had to go to Human Resources and Payroll, and they actually gave her paper checks because there was a problem with the electronic transfers, and she would deposit the payroll checks into her account.
Now, from, we'll say, September until December of 2008, the funds that you were paying in for her, I guess, bills, mortgage, that kind of stuff, those were going into the Wells Fargo?
Things that we'd already agreed that we'd set up a spreadsheet and pay out of the joint account were the utilities and things that were on a regular basis.
Did she give you any inclination as to why her Chase account, which doesn't appear to be used for anything other than collecting her paychecks, had a check that bounced?
She said that the payroll check hadn't cleared by the time that check went through.
Did you follow up with that a week, 2 weeks later? Now, at some point, defendant began to write down what really happened that night. Is that correct?
Correct.
Did she do that at your house?
I don't know where she did it. She showed me the document after it was completed.
Did you see it in electronic copy, like on a laptop, or did you see a printed document?
She was going to show it to me on her laptop, but I prefer to see it printed. I'd be better printed, so we printed it out.
So the first it was offered on the laptop. How was it hooked up to a printer? Did it, let me be more articulate. Was the laptop hooked directly up to a printer, or was it transferred onto like a thumb drive and then onto your computer?
We copied it to the thumb drive, then to my computer to print it.
Is that the same thumb drive that the document that was supposedly written by Stan Cook was on?
Yes.
No objection. Throw on Andy what's been marked as exhibit number 391. You take a moment to look at that and see if you recognize that document.
Yes, this is the document.
Now, after the document was printed out at your house, did you assist in editing the document or in any way creating other versions of this document?
Yes, I did. At first, I was reluctant even to read it because Reese was under strict instructions from her attorney not to discuss what happened with anyone, and I constantly had to remind her of that. But she wanted me to read this. She seemed almost suicidal, as if this were kind of a combination of what really happened and kind of a goodbye note to the world. And so she was insistent that I read it and try to help her make it more clear in any way that I could to tell her story to the world.
Did you actually see her typing or just the finished product?
I just saw the finished product
And did she show that to you at her house or at your house?
at my house.
And just to make sure I'm not assuming anything, you've read this document completely.
I've not read it in 5 years, but at the time I read it, yes.
And at the time that you were reading this document, is this what she was telling you really happened that night?
Absolutely. She had just come back from a therapy session with one of the psychiatrists, and she had told me initially that she had blacked out.
Mr. Flores, would you please listen to the question asked and just answer the question without all of the editorials on every question?
I'm sorry.
Mr. Flores, let's back up. We had looked at your ledger before. You had indicated that at some point you were paying for the defendant to go see a psychologist or psychiatrist by the name of Inspired. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, this document, when it was created, was it after one of those sessions with Ms. Spires?
Yes, it was.
Now, according to what the defendant told you, what inspired the creation of this document?
That in the meeting with the psychologist, she was beginning to remember what happened during the period when she had blacked out.
At the time that you were talking about this document and this, I don't know what you call it, revelation or newfound knowledge, did she seem sure that that's what happened?
Absolutely.
She indicated that there were missing pieces and she wasn't sure that this is what happened.
No.
You got to move to exhibit number 391. No objection. Yeah, I guess we did. Now, at about the time that this document is being drafted, if you recall, was this before or after you had had a discussion with her about the terms of payment of life insurance policy?
I believe we had the discussion of life insurance probably 3-4 days prior to this.
Before we get that, there's a couple of other documents I want to have you try to explain to us, if you can, how they ended up in your house. Mr. Flores, I want to hand you what's been marked as exhibit number 392. And if you need to, we can open that so you can examine the entire contents. Sorry, Mr. Flores. If you wouldn't mind taking a look at that just to make sure that you have a chance to look at the entire contents of exhibit 392.
Do you want me to detail what they are, or just
Well,
acknowledge?
first, just have a look at it if you wouldn't mind.
Yes,
Those are groups of documents that she brought over to your house?
correct,
Driver's license, passport, Sam's Club card, those kind of things.
correct.
Did she tell you why she was bringing a copy of her passport to your house?
Again, we didn't discuss it, she just brought over all the important papers, she wasn't leaving very much at her house.
Did she bring anybody else's passports over to the house?
She brought the girls' passports as well.
One of the other things in this packet is a copy of her and Dale's marriage license, is that correct?
Correct. Mr. Costigan, is
Sir, I want to hand you what's been marked as exhibit number 393. You could take a moment to look at the contents of that exhibit.
Yes.
Can you tell us what's in exhibit number 393?
This was a file folder that I had started when we opened the joint account. And it has the checkbook in her name and a number of statements and printouts regarding the account, as well as receipts for Quest, SRP, DirecTV, other ones that were paid from that joint account.
How is it that you had copies of her bills at your house?
She would bring them over when they came due.
And you would file them away?
Correct. When we paid them from the joint account, I would file them.
Now, all of those bills that she was giving you, those are just in her name, right?
Correct. They're all in her name.
I would assume it would raise a red flag with you if she's handing you, let's say, the electric bill for the house and it's got Dale's name on it.
Certainly. Yes.
Because at that point in time, you thought Dale was not living at the house at all.
On the date of some of these, I knew he was living at the house, but I did not know that they had not been divorced.
I guess I should put it a different way. At the time that you had known her, there wasn't any reason for you to believe that Dale's name should be on any of the bills for the household.
Correct.
You want to move to admit exhibits 392 and 393?
No objection. For receipt.
Mr. Flores, also found in your house was a Wells Fargo bank card with an address for 1909 East Ray Road in Channing. What's that address?
That's for a post-net box that we opened.
Is that the one that you had talked about last week?
Correct.
The same one you put the, I guess, the instruction letters in,
Correct.
along with an indication that the $500 envelope was in the hiding spot.
Correct.
Sir, I want to hand you what's been marked as exhibit number 394. Can you tell us what that is?
Yes, that's the Wells Fargo debit card.
Now, when you say the Wells Fargo debit card, which account are we talking about?
This was on the joint account, and this was a debit card in Marissa's name.
Did you have a similar card in just your name?
Yes, I did.
You want to move to admit exhibit number 394?
Okay. Some of these were previously admitted, counsel. Did you check the back of it to find out whether it was received?
Your Honor, I don't believe 394 was.
Okay. Some of the other ones have that as
Oh,
well.
I apologize.
It's received and it hasn't previously been received.
Mr. Flores, kind of getting back to our timeline a little bit, we've talked about some of the documents found in your house. From January 14th of 2009, which is the date of the Dale was attacked, until February 8th of 2009, somewhere in that area, you're continuing to loan the defendant money. Is that correct?
Correct.
Retainer for an attorney?
Correct.
Aaron Spires, we had talked about before.
Correct.
Why?
I loved her. She was in trouble. I was trying to help.
Now, right around February 5th of 2009, did you and the defendant talk about the life insurance policy?
Yes.
Did you discuss the policy for Dale Harris?
Yes.
What was the substance of the conversation you had with her about that policy?
She had asked if the policy would pay to her or to the kids, or what might happen to that in the event that Dale survived or he didn't survive.
So now at that point in time, Dale was still alive.
Correct.
And did you explain to her what you believed the payout options were under those scenarios?
Yes.
What did you explain to her?
I said that most life insurance policies have a provision that would pay someone if they were seriously injured or disabled, and that those funds would go to Dale himself.
So if Dale survived, the money goes to Dale.
Correct.
If he doesn't survive, where does the money go?
It would go to whoever the beneficiary was.
Did you describe for her a contingency by which the beneficiary would not get paid out?
Yes, I said, obviously, if she had something to do with with the attack on him, that she wouldn't receive the funds. I said that in all likelihood, given how recently the policy has been purchased and the circumstances, that I wasn't convinced that an insurance company would willingly pay anyone. They would likely contest it, no matter what.
Now, this is the conversation you had prior to her showing you the document that she had drafted about what really happened then. Is that correct?
Correct.
At the time, and this is if I don't want to mess up everything, but if I remember your testimony right, at this point in time, February 5th of 2009, she had told you previously that she did admit to doing it, but it was for reasons that the detective said that Dale would be at home waiting for her, that kind of stuff, right?
Correct.
So you did have some information that she at least at some point said she did.
She said initially under the interrogation that she had admitted to having done it, but that she actually had not.
Now, at the time that you were having this discussion with her about the two different scenarios, Dale surviving, Dale not surviving, had you received word yet that Dale's health had taken a turn for the worse?
Objection here.
I guess at that point in time, did you believe Dale was going to live or die?
I wasn't sure. I had understood that he had been moved to some kind of long care or hospice facility.
Now, the letter that Stan drafted and brought over to your house, do you remember about what date that was?
I don't remember the date. It was 3 or 4 days after the other document you referenced.
After the letter that the defendant had written about what really happened that night.
Correct.
That's when Stan shows up with this other document.
They had been sitting out behind my house smoking, and they both came in and presented it to me.
Were you outside while they were out smoking?
No, I'm allergic to cigarette smoke.
As well, the defense is looking over those documents. And the document that the defendant drafted about what really happened that night, the substance of that letter was standing.
Correct.
The letter that Stan had drafted and was showing you a few days after that, would that be like February 8th, February 9th?
I believe so.
Somewhere in there? Well, I guess if you can tell us, was it before or after you got word that Dale was actually dead?
Before.
So Stan shows you, does Stan show you the letter or does the defendant show you the letter?
They were both sitting on the couch. Stan opened up the laptop and pulled up the document, and Reese asked me to read it. And when I looked at it, I said, you know, it's easier for me if you want me to read something to print it. So we put it on the USB stick, printed it again.
You're looking at it printed copy.
Correct.
It wasn't presented to you originally in printed copy, you printed it for purposes of reading.
Correct.
Sir, first I'm handing you what's been marked as exhibit number 322. You can take a moment to look at those documents and see if you recognize them. Let me know when you've had a chance to review them also.
It looks like there are a number of printouts of a couple of different documents. two different documents with multiple printouts of each.
Now, the two different documents we're looking at are one set of documents or different versions of the what really happened that night document that the defendant has shown you. I think you said somewhere around February 5th-ish. Is that right?
Correct.
All
Correct.
right. The other set of documents is the letter that Stan Cook was showing you somewhere before Dale had passed away. Is that right?
Correct.
And there are different, I guess, you want to call them versions or edits of each one?
I'd have to compare them, but there appear to be some minor differences between the different versions.
Were all of those printed out at your house?
I don't know. I only printed one of each.
Let me ask you this question. We've had foundation money that those documents were found at your house. Do you remember any printed copies being brought to your house?
No.
So the only hard copies you remember being are the ones that you printed out to look at?
Correct.
Now, on the, I think it's the documents that are talking about what really happened that night, there seem to be a few places where there are hand edits. Is that correct?
Correct.
Whose handwriting is that?
That is mine.
So you were hand editing some of the documents?
Correct.
Now, inside exhibit number 322, there's also a business card in there. You recognize that business card?
Yes.
What was the purpose of, why do you have that business card?
Sydney, let's take the lunch break. 1:30.
Please rise for the jury.
Forensic examination and also drafted a letter asking that the police department or the news agency accompany him to the police station for his statement.
Why isn't this relevant?
You're all right. I don't see the relevance of the contact. I also informed Mr. Bond that I don't see this witness as being in a position to lay the foundation for receiving this exhibit. Whatever he may know about it will be hearsay in terms of its purpose. That would need to come in through Mr. Cook.
Mr. Cook's going to testify after this.
Yeah, at some point, when Mr. Flores testified.
Well, he's testified as to his knowledge of the paperwork. They did do some hand editing, so at least that one document he has knowledge on, but it seems to me that you could have Mr. Cook lay the foundation of why the business card is in there. What he heard was from Mr. Cook, so it's clearly hearsay.
Your Honor, he's on, and again, I confirmed this up with Mr. Flores, but I would anticipate that he wrote the letter for Mr. Cook to the police agencies based upon just having that card and doing that. So it's not being offered to prove the truth for any matter, sir, that it's a business card. It's just being offered to show why Mr. Flores is authoring these documents in the course of conduct that he took, I guess, in the light of these documents and those statements.
Well, you could have him testify after lunch that based upon the information that he had gotten, he sent out letters to news media. One of them was the member of the Eddie on a business card, and we'll leave it at that until we get Mr. Cook to come in and justify it further. Okay?
Do we want to leave that business card out of this exhibit?
No, I'll put it in, it's just I won't receive the exhibit until after Mr. Cook testified. It sounds like he'll, once he's testified, the foundation will then wait.
Your Honor, might be prudent to split that exhibit in half, because we got one set of documents that would be, I guess, the defendant's statements, the other set that are Mr. Cook's. If we can subdivide that one as we did Exhibit 349 for the purposes of admission.
Okay, the defendant's statements will be 001, Mr. Cook's statement 002, and the business card 003.
Thank you.